Hello, gentlemen. Today I want to try something a little bit different. I've been extremely busy these last couple of weeks. Haven't really had time to script anything. And before I get into the topic at hand, which is going to be unscripted, it's just going to be a sort of an off-the-cuff video. I want to say, first of all, thank you to everybody who submitted content for the Renaissance. I've got about 30 submissions in front of me right now. Of that, I've gone through them all and selected 5 that I'm going to publish. But they were all really pretty. They were good. They were all good. I'm still in the process of writing feedback. It's going to take longer than the initial 2-week period I thought it would, just because of the volume of the submissions. So really, really great to see this response from the MGTOW community. It shows there is a desire to bring back that intellectual level of discourse and this new idea generation that once characterized MGTOW. So that's great. I am going to cut off the submission period now formally. I'm going to open it back up again. So I know a few people have contacted me and they're saying that they're in the process of writing a script. Trees, I'm thinking of you. No problem. If you still want to finish the script, apologies for any inconvenience, but go ahead and just submit it during the next open window. So today I want to talk about something that I think I haven't really heard talk much about. It's this process that's not love itself. It's infatuation, essentially. I want to talk about infatuation and the different forms it can take and how it can manifest. And I'm going to talk about it in 2 forms. There's the female side of it from what I've observed, and there's the male side of it from what I've both observed and actually gone through. So let me take a second to organize my thoughts. I think the best way to approach this is going to be to talk about what I like to talk about in terms of. So in the last video, Hypergamy's Core, I talked about the 2 sorts of attraction that a man can exhibit, that a woman will find attractive. You have infrastructural, that's like how rich he is, what's his societal rank, and so forth. And active, like how much is he taking steps toward the things he's passionate about, or his quote-unquote, his mission, so to speak. I want to bifurcate the active attractiveness into 2 forms, and we'll go by temperature. I think that in terms of active attractiveness, these are 2 active modes of the human man. Now, again, it's a simplified version. It's not a perfect model, but I think it's decent in terms of communicating what I'm talking about. Let's talk about fire and ice. So fire, masculine fire, that's passion. That's the overwhelming impulsivity, the risk-taking behavior that eventually leads a man to, buy some dude driving up in an airplane into the sky and leaving the smoke message asking for his soon-to-be fiancée to marry him, that kind of thing. These risk-taking behaviors that are often spurred on by a woman's gaze, really. A man, I think, in a lot of ways, is given energy by knowing that women are watching. And it begins that fire. This is sort of the active fire I'm talking about. And then the ice is much more of when a man uses his intellect and pieces together seemingly disparate patterns, or in a particularly incisive way, manages to problem solve or create new theories. So it's very thought oriented. It also encompasses, I think, willpower, staying power, and discipline. So that would be masculine ice. The Muse effect is an organic process. It's an organic process that happens naturally. The man becomes enthralled by a woman. He becomes so taken by her beauty and her radiance and her personality and all of these facets of who she is. And it lights a fire in him. It brings him to new heights. Biochemically, it boosts his testosterone levels. Desires both at once to possess her and make her his, and also sort of mark her as his territory. Essentially, I like to look at it in terms of a man will try and pervade her with his passion. So we've seen this before. It's the natural dynamic of a man who is sort of highly charged. When he meets a woman he falls in love with, hell and high water can't keep him from her. He will do everything. He'll write her poetry and bring her flowers and sweep her off her feet and just overcome her with that depth of fiery affection and desire. And I think a woman, she has to be in a particular state to receive this, because if she's already, I talked about, hypergamy's core in terms of a woman filtering her cold hypergamy through the warmth of consciousness. Like, she feels everything. Her emotions, essentially, I think, are the filter through which she experiences life. And this allows her, I'll get more into this later, to ex post facto retroactively justify something that if it was perceived objectively might seem cold and heartless, but because she is living it, she is sensating, she is sensing life itself, she is living this hypergamy. It's not this artificial process. It's still, she can still emotionally retro-rationalize to herself that she's the heroine of her own fairy tale, or perhaps the victim. I'll talk more about that later. But the point right now is a woman needs to be in a place where she's looking to be, her heart is looking to be pervaded by love. I think most women, to one extent or another, are in that state. I look at it in terms of, I used to know this, I had an ex, and we were exclusive. This was way back, it was when I was 20, maybe 19, I guess. And she talked about how, like, I asked her, this was back when I was very blue pill, and I asked her, like, could it ever be that I was the only one you would always love? I asked her that. And she said, I don't think so. Like she never lied to me, and that's one thing I really liked about her. It kind of got me sped up with the red pill pretty quick. She never really seemed to lie. She would always, she respected me enough to at least tell me how she saw it, because she knew that was so important to me. And also probably because she knew I would sense that bullshit if she tried to pull anything over on me. But anyway, she talked a lot about how her heart would have multiple spaces in it for different people that left an impact, a loving impact on her life. And from that point forward, she never would fully let go of that space. That space had been, so to speak, carved into her heart. And I had a space there. It was a rather large space, but there was a lot of people in her heart. And not necessarily just because of sex. This is not necessarily the way this is done, but it's a romantic love that she feels for a lot of different people. I think as I've gotten older, I just kind of kept it to myself. I nodded, I was like, that's interesting. But I was thinking about it. And I started seeing that. I don't know if this is just a positive confirmation bias, but I like to think I'm pretty objective with myself, as objective as I can be. I've seen this with a lot of women. If you just look, I think that they have a polyamorous quality. The thing they care about most is affection and feeling loved in their heart. And they'll often have multiple avenues to this. They want to diversify away the risk. And so this is, I think, the sort of the filter that they filter their hypergamy through in their felt experience. That they talk about having many different men at once, maybe some at arm's length or whatnot. But that's what fulfills her. And so I want to talk about it in terms of drugs. I think that each man is sort of like a different drug. So bringing back around this Muse effect I was talking about, this man is a very intense drug. He's pervading her heart with his drug, his man drug, so to speak, for lack of a more eloquent term. And she'll feel it. At first, she'll feel it quite poignantly, quite powerfully, and it'll move her. And slowly over, like at the beginning of the relationship, it's good. But the man, I think he begins to realize, or at least this has been the case in my experience when I allowed myself to be immolated by the Muse effect. And it is easy to allow yourself to be immolated by the Muse effect. Just It's an organic process that everyone in society tells you is okay and right. But it's the man, I think, or at least this was the case in my experience, begins to feel her becoming desensitized to the spikes, the emotional spikes. It's this opium and amphetamine mixture that she feels being around someone she's infatuated with. But I'm describing the process of infatuation here as it's filtered through, I think, consciousness as best I can. And so she begins to become desensitized to any man's love drug if she's given it too often. She becomes addicted to it, not dissimilar to heroin, but or any drug that's addictive. I like to think of heroin because this same ex I was talking about eventually became a heroin addict. And I remember asking her what it was like to take heroin because I had never taken it. I never have an interest in that. And she said, well, it's like liquid gold flowing through your body. Like from the injection point, you feel this liquid gold ambrosia warmth just flow through your entire body. And it makes you feel whole. That's how she described it. And I asked her, like, as she kept doing heroin, you know, did she feel as much as she did before? Because I had read, of course, that people become desensitized. And this was, sure enough, it was. And sure enough, she didn't feel that gold as much each time she shut up. She would need more and more of it. I think that part of this, interestingly enough, was sort of an underhanded pleading for love as well. Heroin, it's dangerous territory to understand a woman in this way because our natural inclination, our natural biology makes us want to be sympathetic to a woman. And I think in many ways we have to be rational enough to stand in the way of the Muse effect consuming us as men. But I think it's easy to understand. A woman, she does things like heroin, they're substitutes for love. Love, she is a being of love. I've said this in many videos before. This is how love is the lens of her consciousness. This is the filter of her connection to life, and the means, the mode of her expression. And if she's not feeling pervaded by love, she'll try and find substitutes. And I think it was an outcry for love, and it was a love I wasn't giving to her. I mean, this was a different time than when I was dating her. It was when she was doing heroin. And Blue Pill Coterie was very strongly moved to try and rescue her, but there was always a red pill part of me, and I knew that it would bring me down to do so. And I wasn't willing to self-sacrifice. And so the point is a woman becomes resistant to drugs, she becomes resistant to love from a given man, and so forth, even as she becomes addicted. And this is tough. I think oftentimes we talk about how the challenges, shall we say, that MGTOW, that men face in life, but women face their own slew of challenges. And one of them is this love addiction, this love need that they have. But I think it's a particular sort of love. They crave different sorts of love, but the kind of love they can only get from a man is passion. Like, they can get nurturing and stuff from women. But I knew that I would have to go and dance like a madman and make her laugh and pervade her reality the best that I could with my fiery passion if I was going to rescue her from this heroin addiction. And I didn't do it. I chose to prioritize myself. And the Muse effect, though, has consumed me in the past. That was with a different woman that it did. The Muse effect eventually will immolate a man. It'll bring a man to the precipice, because deep within all of us, TFM talks about this a lot, we have the dominance instinct. We have this desire to, I think it comes from a desire to be enough. To be enough for to be able to face down any given situation. The source of that is that we must feel like we alone are enough. And I think that same token, it goes for the Muse effect. I look at a woman and I think, I have to be enough. I must be enough. We all think this, I think, when we're infatuated. And so a man begins to amp up the dose proportionate to her building resistance. He thinks, I've got to keep pervading her, got to keep giving her that spike that I know she needs to stay infatuated. But this tolerance begins to build, just as it would with heroin, just as it would with a drug. And over time, I don't think she ever becomes fully resistant. It just depends on the person. But even if she's addicted, there's not enough space. The Muse effect makes it such that if a man has given himself fully to fire and leaves no ice, this is where the ice comes in, then the relationship is doomed because he continues to overload her sensory until it numbs her sensory mechanism, and she's no longer able to feel spiked, emotionally spiked, pervaded, as it were, by a given man. And so it's the desensitization on the part of a woman and the Muse effect on the part of the man. Now, I think that this is particularly important because a woman feels loyalty in terms of emotional investment. And emotional investment is transient. It's based on emotional spikes. Frankly, it's based on infatuation. I think that a woman will only really feel loyal to a man, and what she'll do for a man is directly proportionate to the depth of emotional investment she feels in him. And this is why pair bonding fails. This is why marriage fails. Even if a marriage, quote unquote, succeeds, I think it's very rare. I know there are exceptions here, but I think it's very rare that people will come to me and say, hey, Coterie, we're really, really, really happy with each other after 40 years of marriage. So I want to talk about also the post-infatuation process and then the three kinds of guys. You've got, and I mean, I think there's more than three types. There's sort of the modulated bad boy as well. But really there's three. There's the quote-unquote beta male. As I've said in previous videos, I don't love the beta-alpha dichotomy because in some ways, I only don't love it in terms of how gynocentric it is. I think, though, that there would be a pecking order, a social rank hierarchy among men if no women were around. It's just part of who we are. We all have this dominance instinct. And so if there were 10 men alone on an island and they were stranded and they knew that and there was no women there, they knew that they'd never see civilization again, bullshit that they'd all be totally equal. There'd be a hierarchy. It would just naturally form. And so I do think that there are alphas and betas, but I think they're a lot different than gynocentric. Like, you think about the gynocentric alpha. This is going to be admittedly a bit of a voluntary tangent here, but I'm cognizant of it. I do think it's interesting to talk about. We talk about alphas in terms of the gynocracy. We're talking about these juiced up idiots, the muscle heads, basically, the Cro-Magnons, as it were, that just shoot up steroids and try and become super physically dominant, or they put other men down and simply try to be bullies, essentially, and then they get pussy that way. And I think that this is interesting because if we're going to be ruthlessly honest with ourselves, we've all been the ones to look up how to boost my testosterone on Google and see these websites and be like, okay, vitamin D, good, got it. Hope no one else is looking at this shit so I can get an edge. We're all doing this as men. Or a grand majority of us are. Maybe some listeners will write in the comments, Coterie, I'm just natural. My testosterone must just be naturally super high because I never look at how to boost it. I'm super swollen. Great. Yeah, good for you. But for the most of us, I think we've all looked into how to boost our testosterone and all this stuff. And it's like in natural ways, and there's this sort of, there's different forms of dominance. I think that a healthy form of dominance is acquired through prestige. I don't see this talked about very much. But in an ideal society, an honor-based society, in my opinion, is ideal. I'll go into that maybe in a later video. But you've got prestige form of dominance, and you have bullying form of dominance, essentially. Prestige form of dominance is acquired in a healthy way that's constructive. I look at healthiness as a constructive system. So basically, there's two systems you can create vis-a-vis dominance. You can create a system that will go on and actually work and function well and benefit everyone within the system, where everyone feels like the system is fair and people achieve dominance and rank based on their own efforts, their own merits, and their own skills. That's a prestige-based dominance system. And then you have essentially, I don't know how to call it, aggression or bullying. I don't really know what to call it. Sort of dominance system, bullying dominance. You know, the biggest, strongest, most physically intimidating guy is going to take control by force and kill anyone who stands in his way. I think that that form is rightfully reviled, because it's not really that person even earned it or that he's even best cut out to be leader. He's just the biggest and the strongest. And so, anyway, that's what I talk about when I say alpha and beta. I'm still going to use those, I think, probably going forward, maybe at some point. But I look at alpha and beta as quite different. I look at a good alpha male as someone who's able to architect a system so that everyone within his tribe, so to speak, benefits, is provisioned for, and essentially is good enough at planning, good enough at seeing potential futures, good enough at essentially doing what needs to be done and motivating people, leading people in a positive way, so that the tribe goes on, so that the tribe flourishes. And that's kind of what I see as an alpha male. So anyway, when I say beta, now I'm going to be talking in a sort of a gynocentric way, not because I like gynocentrism, but just because I know we all know what I'm talking about. Most beta males will never, if we're going to classify people in this way for the sake of understanding and visualizing this particular vein of thought, three types of guys that a woman will be with. She'll be with the betas. These are the guys that don't allow themselves to express passion, or maybe they're just lowly charged. They don't have too much energy all the time. They just want peace. Peace is enough for them, and they'll settle for a contented, sort of nurturing relationship. And then you have the guys who are highly charged and passionate, and you could call these, I guess, the crusaders. They have noble intentions. They want to be a hero. They've always dreamed about being a hero. And these are the guys that I think are really liable to get caught up in the Muse effect fully. So they'll feel like they'll experience most fire. And then you have essentially the villains. And the villains, they recognize the need for fire, but they filter it through the conscience. They filter it through the consciousness of ice. And so they operate based upon their ice. And they channel their fire with their ice. And I use the word villain not because I, think that they are actually villains. I just think that most gynocentric society would perceive them as such. And so bad boys will fall into that category, but it's a little bit different. I think that we've got three types of guys, and we've got three types of the way that love will pan out. With the beta, the woman will filter it through her. Let's talk about how a woman will filter each through her own consciousness, her own emotions. With the beta, she'll often move to a beta when she's 28, maybe 27. I've seen them move to betas as early as 26, 25. After they've been hurt by enough villains, they'll move to a beta. And when they're with a beta, they'll recognize the beta is not dissimilar to their female friends in many ways. They both want peace and affection and tranquility and nurturing. And she enjoys this with the beta, just like she enjoys that aspect of love with female friends. And he's female approved, so quote unquote, he's a good guy. And because he's a good guy, he's been approved by society. Remember, her morality even is circumstance based. And I think she sees life itself through whatever eyes society sees her. So in a gynocentric society, she's going to believe he's good, and her guilt will revolve around hurting him. And she doesn't want to hurt him. But Because he's unable to pervade her mood, pervade her heart with masculine passion, she will eventually become starved for that special sort of affection that she can only receive from men, like masculine men with the sort of the passionate charge. And so this is how she's going to filter it through her own consciousness. She doesn't want to hurt her boyfriend, this beta male that she's pair bonding with. But she is hurting him, and she realizes this because as a byproduct of not being pervaded, she becomes a bitch. If you haven't read it, read The Way of the Superior Man by David Data. It's really a very excellent book. He talks about this particular mechanic, how a woman will essentially manifest Kali, the destructress, if her heart's not being penetrated. I think this is very true. It's one of the things I agree with Dida. And because her heart's not being pervaded by this need for masculine attention and masculine passion, she'll go find it elsewhere. She'll find it with likely a villain, but possibly a hero, but the hero would have to not know about it. And then she thinks, well, everybody wins. The beta still thinks he's the only man in her life, and so because what he doesn't know doesn't hurt him, the way she sees things, she can now be a loving girlfriend to the beta in exchange for whatever stability, and financial or emotional or otherwise, he's providing her, while she's still getting pervaded by the passion, the fire, of either the villain or the hero on the side in secret. This way, she's able to meet her own needs, and then it's like a Reaganomics trickle-down effect. She can meet the need of her beta male provider. Now, if she initially gets into a real, and then if the beta male finds out, maybe the relationship ends, and maybe it doesn't. Maybe they just become polyamorous or whatnot. We've seen this. Turd Flinging Monkey did an interesting article long time ago about this dude who is just so cucked. And I don't like to use that word particularly, but in this case, it's totally apt. He literally is a cuckold. This dude was so cucked. He was just a cuck writing about how proud he was of being a cuck. I'll link in the description. I don't remember the title of it offhand, but I'll post it in the low bar. That's the quintessential beta male I'm talking about, that is so submissive, that wants peace at any cost, that he is willing to literally let her woman go and get all of her holes fucked by other guys like twice a week. And then it quote unquote turns him on to hear about it. I think and that relationship, I guess it can sort of work, and it's sort of unholy fucking, I don't want to call it pathetic, because it's his life, he's his own man. If it makes him happy to think about his wife getting bent over by people all the time, whatever. But I think for the most of us, though, that's really not going to be resonant with us. And then there's the hero, and this is the man I used to be in a lot of ways, or tried to be. This is the man who's highly charged, and if she gets in a relationship with the hero, the desensitization happens. The Muse effect happens. The hero immolates. The hero finds himself, struggling to keep food down, and it all falls to shit because she gets desensitized to his passion slowly over time. They'll break up. It is what it is. She'll never fully lose the craving for him, and I think that craving will come back over time. But it'll be a while. It's like one of the holes in her heart becomes this guy. The beta, for example, I talked about earlier, will never make a hole in this woman's heart. It's only the other two types, the hero and the villain. And will she cheat on the hero? Not initially. The hero is likely controlling. He controls her out of love. He tries to dominate her and all this shit. He likely gets highly possessive and jealous. I've been that guy. I don't think I've ever been cheated on, but I don't know. I could be wrong, but I was highly suspicious of it, even as the quote-unquote hero archetype. I was incredibly, incredibly controlling and incredibly not trusting at all. And there's other manifestations of the hero type. You could say I was never fully a hero type because of how controlling I got. Some hero types will not be controlling. They'll just trust the woman completely. I think these guys are more likely to get cheated on. But I think the longer a relationship goes, the more likely the hero is to get cheated on, proportionate to how desensitized she becomes to being infatuated to him. I think that the infatuation process is a woman's form of love. I don't think she feels love in a lasting, linear sense. Infatuation is pretty much it. It's that emotional investment, and she will make decisions based on her emotions in that vein. And then you have the villain. And as I'm sure you've surmised, this is what I am now. I don't think of myself in terms of, I'm some badass villain or some shit. I'm just Coterie, but society would likely see me as a villain within this regard. A bad boy is a sort of a type of villain, and it's interesting because a woman will, so it's more, a villain will be more strategic in channeling his flame, his fire. A villain will spike her when he knows it's strategically optimal, and then pull it back when he knows it's strategically optimal. Infatuation with a hero will last only a long time if they have a long-distance relationship or something introduces a cold element to give her that hot-cold. It mixes with hot-cold to prolong the infatuation, because infatuation is contingent, I think, in a woman upon, moments of hotness, so to speak, moments of fire, getting the drug, and then withdrawal from the drug to make her need the drug again. That's the coldness. And so long-distance relationships give that simulacrum, so they last longer for a while. And this is why you see a lot of guys will say, well, I'm a hero, and my girl still loves me. Is your relationship long-distance? That's my question. Maybe it's not. I don't know. I can't, there will always be people in the comment section that will be the exception to the rule, but I'm just generalizing here because I think there's use in generalizations. And I'm not going to apologize for generalizing. So, the villain understands that love is a construct. He understands that it's cause and effect. And so he still feels the Muse effect, but he harnesses it and he channels it. And this is what I was talking about in the pathogenesis of vulnerability when I said, I've become the sadist in Jean-Paul Sartre's version of the sadomasochist relationship. The woman is the masochist. Usually people fall on a spectrum there. The sadist is the one in control. The woman is the sensate. She feels, he directs. And so, in this way, a relationship can last because the infatuation process can be maintained through cold strategy. It is what it is. You call it whatever you want, but that's the way it can be maintained. The question then becomes, what the fuck is the point? The point then becomes pragmatic, right? It becomes a practical thing. I like to talk to my friends in terms of, if you ever send a woman a text, send it with the cognizance that everyone, send it as if the entire universe will see it, because that's pretty much what's going to happen. She'll show her friends all kinds of personal information that you share to her. And, anything via text, and they'll all go over together in this powwow. And if she can craft you into the villain with her friends, her beta male orbiters and her gay friends and all this stuff, and they just keep reaffirming to her that she's the good one, then she gets to, I think this is why a lot of women are masochistic as well. They get to feel like the victim and the hero at once, or the heroine, and then they can break it off with either the passionate man, the hero, or the villain, and make him into the bad guy. And then they'll just get reaffirmed that he was the bad guy. And their circumstance-based morality becomes okay with it because everyone they've immediately surrounded themselves with approves of her decision to cut the guy off, because she begins to, it's a natural process. I don't even know if she's cognizant of it. She begins to, because of her fading infatuation, that natural process incepts, it catalyzes her, not demonizing of the man per se, but villainizing of whoever it's with, whether it's a villain or a hero. And ironically enough, it's more likely that she'll be unable to villainize the villain, because from her paradigm, the villain is hot-cold still. So she'll still be infatuated. If that infatuation is perpetually maintained, then she may see him as a hero, even though he's a villain, and she may see the hero as a villain. Interesting stuff, regardless. And so, I think one final thing, I'll leave this video on this, is a thought. Never tell a woman, I mean, I think with men as well, just don't tell people, but especially a woman, that you've been involved with. your deepest secrets, your deepest, darkest secrets and ambitions. Never tell her the whole picture. Ever. Even I know it might feel good to do it. You might think, or maybe you wouldn't. I don't know. But don't do it. Because no matter what you tell a woman, she'll tell somebody else. Eventually. Pillow talk. Think of it. A woman is emotionally driven, and she invests emotionally and then acts based on that investment. So if you have a girlfriend right now, she'll be loyal right now. She won't spill your secrets. But say the emotional infatuation completely fades, and she's with a new guy. And that new guy is, one of these heroes, shall we say, the ones that are super. He's a hero, so he's possessive. He's a hero, so he needs to know everything about the previous boyfriends. She'll tell him all kinds of shit. I know this because it's happened to me a couple times. I'm not saying this is a universal truth here. I'm just saying I made the mistake in the past of telling a woman important, like vital information with regard to my future. And because she got so caught up in emotions after we broke up a long time later when she was with a new guy who's, a hero. He tries to be controlling. He data mined her and she told him, and then she confessed it to me later. She didn't want to feel guilt. She wants to pass that right off, and so she confessed to me. She's like, "Oh, Coterie, I told this guy about your plans, your business plans, for example. I told this guy about your past in some ways." That was personal information that she just relayed right onto this guy. So if you ever do have friends with benefits or trysts, keep the most important stuff to yourself. Because it's just better that way. You just have more control over your information. Thank you, gentlemen. Have a pleasant evening.